Story number 1. This is sort of a strange story, and I can understand how some of you might not believe me. It happened, and it was the most terrifying experience of my life. I live in a pretty normal suburb, which I won't be disclosing at this time. My family consists of me, my little sister, and my mother. We often call ourselves the Female Musketeers. My father's been out of the picture for a long time, and being the oldest, I usually help my mother out as much as I can. I was helping her out the day we met a serial killer. I usually pick my sister up after school and take her home because my mother works until late. Then I get dinner started and help her with her homework. However, that day we got home and I struggled to find anything to cook with. After letting my mother know through a call, I grabbed some emergency cash and we headed to the store. I was 17 at the time and my little sister was 14. I was okay with leaving her at home, but she wanted to come with. She does anything to get out of doing her homework. Anyway, we got to the store and bought everything we needed to make some mac and cheese. I'm not a chef, so I only really knew how to make a few simple dishes. On the way back to the car, the parking lot was kind of empty. The suburb we live in is a little dead, and the only time the store got busy was during the weekend. So it was a bit strange to see some random guy standing by our car. He seemed normal overall. I kept my sister close and told her not to talk to him before we reached the car. I unlocked and threw the stuff in the trunk, but before I could close it, the guy just appeared beside me. I practically jumped out of my skin. "Where's your mom, little girl?" the guy asked me. First of all, I was a little peeved that he called me a little girl. I was in that stage when I saw myself as a responsible adult, and it always annoyed me when people spoke down to me like I was a child. Second, my skin was crawling, and all I wanted to do was get out of there. "We don't have any money," I told him, expecting him to be some kind of beggar. I closed the trunk and went to open the driver's seats. My little sister was already in the passenger seat. The man stepped in front of me and grabbed the wrist of the hand I was holding the car keys in. "I don't want your money, little girl. I want you." Before I even had a chance to react, he twisted my wrist and I cried out. The keys fell from my hand and hit the ground. My little sister screamed and got out of the car. She rushed over and began pounding her fists against the guy's back and kicking at his shins. I tried to pull away from the guy, but every time I tried, it felt like I might break my wrist. He began pulling me towards the back seat of the car. It seemed so effortless for him. He managed to keep hold of me while he spun around and grabbed my sister by her hair. At that point, we were both screaming for help. I'm afraid to think about what might have happened to us if he had managed to force us into the car. Thankfully for us, someone inside the store heard the commotion and ran out. The moment the guy realized he'd been caught, he let us both go and raced out of the parking lot. Now, at the time, I thought me and my sister were just unlucky enough to be in the same place as some madman who thought he could get away with kidnapping us. It wasn't until a few months later that I found out the truth. We were watching the news while my little sister did her homework and I cooked dinner. The news said something about a known serial killer in the area. Serial killers aren't exactly a rare thing. We hear about them all the time. When they started explaining the serial killer's pattern, however, my blood ran cold. He likes to corner young girls in parking lots where he forces them into their cars and drives them to a remote place off the highway. From there, he tortures and kills them. They named several areas he operates in, and my suburb showed up. The worst part, he's already collected 6 victims and is still on the loose. Story number 2. In 2003, a man named Charles Edmund Cullen was arrested after committing several murders in the medical centers where he worked. He was a nurse and had done most of his killings by giving patients overdoses of their medicine. I found out about his arrest through a friend of mine, and the moment I heard that name, the most horrible memory played in my mind. It was the late 90s, and I was in my mid-20s. I spent most of my college days visiting my grandmother at her hospital after finishing my lectures. She was recently diagnosed with lung cancer. It wasn't terminal, and she was going through her treatment. The day I met Charles Cullen, I was visiting my grandmother on one of her worst days. She was in a lot of pain and hadn't slept at all the night before. She was a really shy woman and didn't like talking to people. I had to ask the nurses to give her a higher dosage of her pain meds that day. Once she'd calmed down, I sat there for a while and we talked. Eventually, my grandmother nodded off. I took the chance to go get myself some lunch from the cafeteria and something to drink. I was away for maybe 10 minutes. I kick myself almost every day for that, for leaving her alone. We were in a hospital. You're supposed to be able to trust the doctors and the workers that are trying to keep your family members alive. I didn't think anything of it. However, when I got back to the room, I found one of the nurses standing by my grandmother's bed. He smiled at me, so I thought nothing of it. I did think it was odd because he wasn't the nurse that was meant to be looking after her, but I figured her usual nurse was busy. I walked over and glanced at his name tag before greeting him. "Hi Charles, is everything all right?" I asked him. He looked a little surprised, like I put him on the spot. "Just giving her a little extra something for the pain," he replied. Alarm bells set off in my head instantly. I did ask for them to up her pain meds, but they had already done it. I wasn't clued up on all that medical stuff. I didn't think it would be a good idea to give her too much of any medicine. "The other nurse already upped her dosage," I told him. He smiled and nodded, but proceeded to stick his needle into my grandmother's drip. I stepped forward and yanked him away from her. "Didn't you hear me?" I yelled at him. "Look, just let me do my job," he yelled back. I'd never seen a nurse get as angry as he got with me. I know nurses get angry, but they're usually really good at hiding it from patients and that. This guy didn't care. He looked like he wanted to rip my throat out. I basically told him to get out before I called the doctor and the other nurses. I'm so glad I stood my ground that day. I wasn't sure if I did the right thing at the time. It wasn't until several years later when I saw his name on the news that I realized that I saved my grandmother that day. She went on to recover from her cancer and lived for another 20 years. I never told her what happened, and I never will. The news said that Charles Cullen admitted to killing 4 patients in the hospital that my grandmother was staying in. It makes me sick to think she could have been his 5th victim. Story number 3. Around 2004, I met a man who called himself Ronald. However, later on, everyone else came to know him as the Bayou Strangler. I lived in Louisiana at the time, after moving away from my parents shortly after I turned 21. You see, I came out as gay to them and they didn't take it very well. I had a few friends in Louisiana that agreed to put me up for a while, so I made my way there and that was that. I had stayed there for a few months before my friends told me about this gay bar nearby. I was glad to have friends who accepted me for who I was. They even went with me my first nights. I was kind of shy, so I basically just drank, talked with my friends, and checked the place out. I later got a little more confidence and found myself going back there often, most times by myself. One night, I met Ronald. He was charming and sweet. He bought me a couple of drinks and flirted with me all night. I'd met a couple of guys in that bar before, but none of them were as confident or straightforward as him. I guess that's what I liked about him. The night got away from me, and before I knew it, it was closing time. The bartender called for last rounds, and they turned the music down. That was when Ronald asked if I wanted to go back to his place. I was more than a little tipsy that night. He'd been buying me drinks for hours, and I'd lost count of how many I had. I could barely walk straight, and if it weren't for his hand on my back, I would have fallen off the chair a long time ago. So I agreed to go back with him. In the back of my mind, I knew it was a bad idea. I didn't know him, not really. I didn't know the area well enough, and I hadn't informed any of my friends where I was going or when I'd be back. So going home with some stranger would win the award for worst idea of the night. Anyway, I didn't end up going home with him. Luckily for me, the bartender was completely sober and knew a bad situation when he saw one. On our way out, he stopped us and asked me if I knew Ronald. My drunk and honest brain thankfully admitted that I didn't. The bartender took charge and said he couldn't let me leave with someone I didn't know. Ronald fought him on it, saying that I wanted to go home with him. The bartender could plainly see I was in no condition to agree to anything. He insisted that I stay in the bar and that he would help me contact someone I did know. I am so grateful to that bartender to this day. The next day, I woke up with a banging headache and a fogging memory of what had happened. My friend had come to pick me up after the bartender called him. He roughly explained what happened to me. It wasn't until a few years later that I truly realized the massive bullet I dodged that night. Ronald Joseph Dominique would later be arrested and tried for the murder of at least 23 men. They called him the Bayou Strangler because he would lure his victims in and then strangle them to death. He mostly targeted gay men at bars and stuff like that before luring them back to his trailer. I had one foot in the grave that night, and I was too drunk to even know it. I'm better off now. I have a boyfriend, and we're in a pretty serious relationship. I don't go out to bars or anything anymore, and I hardly ever drink. I made up with my parents and moved back home shortly after that as well. I'm so glad that there was someone around that night to do the thinking for me. Otherwise, I would have been the Bayou Strangler's next victim.